Hi, everyone. Welcome to Aurelian Coaching Weekly. I'm Nicole Littman. Thanks for joining. This week, we are talking about employee recognition. And, you know, it's funny that this is such a huge issue with a lot of managers struggle with this. A lot of companies struggle with this. And it's fascinating to me because it is so easy to do this well. So easy. People get it wrong all the time. So what I want to talk about this week is how to do it well and give you a formula for it. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what level of management you are in. It doesn't matter what industry. It doesn't matter how big your team is or how big your company is. Doesn't matter. Follow this formula and you will get employee recognition right every single time. I guarantee you, every single time, okay? So what employee recognition is actually made up of are two things. One is acknowledgement, okay? And second is reward. And I'm gonna take those two things separately because they are separate. So you can do each of those well. Right? Now, when you do both well, you are a master at employee recognition, and you probably have employee satisfaction rates through the roof. Now, if you only do one of those things well, your employee satisfaction probably suffers a little bit. Okay, so let's take acknowledgement first. There are three elements to acknowledging an employee's work, okay? So the first is that the feedback and the accolades need to be contextualized. And what that means is that you're putting their good work into a context of why it matters. You know, you're recognizing that the employee did something that serves some larger purpose, whether it is project goals or company values or other things. But that's number one. The acknowledgement needs to be contextualized. Number two, it needs to be specific. Okay, so general acknowledgement never lands well with employees, right? You should have 1 to 2 points that show the employee and the rest of the team members that you know how they did it, right? You are acknowledging some aspect of their day-to-day work that eventually led to a really good outcome. So number two, specifics. Number three, it needs to be personal. Personal. The number one mistake that I see people make, the higher up the ladder they get promoted, is that employee recognition gets less and less personal. Now, I get it. You are no longer in the weeds, right? The higher up the chain you go, but that doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to know what your people are doing, especially when they do it well. You want to be able to call out individuals for their specific contributions, right? Don't name an entire team. Don't do that, okay? If your team, one of your teams, had a really great result, fantastic. Do a little bit of digging to know who did what and call out the individuals for what they did. Okay, so that's acknowledgement. It needs to be contextualized. Basically, why was it a good thing? Number two, it should be specific. You should be able to call out that you know how somebody got that really great outcome. And number three, it should be personal, absolutely personal. Call out the person by name. Okay, so this has, if you follow this formula, the acknowledgement piece of employee recognition is golden. I mean, every single time. And it doesn't need to be lengthy, by the way. 3 sentences. That's fine, but that's how to do the acknowledgement part of employee recognition well. Now, it has a couple of other opportunities if you follow this formula. One is that you can use this as a teaching moment, right? Because if you know the level of detail for the how and the why, that you could prompt a subsequent discussion about how others can do something similar. Is this a best practice? Can we work it into SOPs? Are there other ways that other team members, other employees can learn from that case study and either replicate or generate ideas for how to get similar results? So it's wonderful to use employee recognition as a teaching moment and to get others on board for how to get similar results and get the mind thinking for how they could contribute. Okay, so the other thing is that employee you should be sensitive to how the employee really likes to get recognized, right? So I said earlier that this formula works whether or not you're giving, you're doing the acknowledgement in big groups or smaller team groups, but just be conscious that sometimes the employees may not feel comfortable, and that may create a lot of discomfort if you're doing this sort of public acknowledgement. So just be aware that sometimes providing that acknowledgement one-on-one has just as much impact, and it might be more comfortable for the employee. Okay, if you don't know, ask. Just ask them. You know, I was thinking of acknowledging your work at the all hands meeting. Would you be okay with that? Now, some of the employees might feel a little bit uncomfortable about having the light shown on them, but they are not opposed, right? Some employees might feel really uncomfortable and prefer not to. And in that case, absolutely deliver the acknowledgement, but do it one-on-one, right? This takes some time. It absolutely takes some time, and that's okay, because here's the thing. You're going to be kicking yourself if you lose people because they have low job satisfaction because of this, right? If they're not acknowledged enough, right? It is worth the time. Here's the other thing to think about. Think about how much time you spend doing research and confirming things when you have to give somebody criticism, right? If the feedback is negative, people dot their I's and cross their T's. It shouldn't be different when the feedback is positive, right? Do the legwork that you need to do to make sure the acknowledgement is contextualized and specific. It pays a lot of dividends downstream. Okay. So now I want to shift gears to the reward part. Okay, so we've talked, once again, employee recognition is made up of acknowledgement and reward. So let's talk about reward. Reward is usually a quid pro quo, right? So you do this extra thing and I will give you this other extra thing. And we're done. We're going to call it even, right? Most reward programs are like that, and I'm not opposed to that. I mean, that's fine if your reward program is like that. Sometimes it's somebody goes above and beyond, and then they qualify for a monetary bonus. Fantastic. Some companies do gift cards. It doesn't matter, okay? But that's usually how reward programs work. You know, you do this thing, I give you this thing. Then we're done, okay? That's fine. What I would encourage people to think about is there a method of reward that has some longer lasting impact, both to the employee who's being rewarded and to the rest of the team or the rest of the department, okay? And the question that you should be asking yourself around reward is there a way for the employee to take some ownership of this? They had a really fantastic outcome. Can we have the employee take ownership of it? Well, what does that mean? Maybe it is creating a best practice around it. Maybe it's developing a case study to be used in onboarding going forward. Maybe that person becomes the go-to trainer for that thing. Maybe you can find a way to increase the individual's cachet within the larger organization by having them do a presentation about what the circumstances were, what they did, what they learned, and what the outcome was, right? So this concept of a lasting impact on the reward side is for two things. One is, can you expand that employee's professional development, right? Can they get something more lasting out of the experience rather than just, here's a reward, check it off the list, and we're even, right? Secondly is, how many people benefit from that potentially, right? You are putting that employee in the position of owning something, right? Not without oversight, of course, but that they feel more invested, right? They did this great thing. Now they're responsible for teaching other people how to do it. That's fantastic, right? Because then everybody else gets to learn this thing and you don't have to do it, right? So I'm not saying throw out the quid pro quo approach to reward. I would just ask yourself if there are opportunities to have some more lasting and downstream effects of a reward. Now, the one caveat that I want to make about this is, if you are going to take this approach to rewards, that you can't make it a burden to the employee. It is the employee's choice to take on the extra work or responsibility to do the more lasting thing, okay? You should give them the opportunity to decline. If they don't want to spend another few hours creating a case study, or they don't want the additional responsibility of training all the other team members on something, they don't want to create an SOP or whatever, okay. Now, that doesn't mean the conversation ends there, right? Maybe there are other ways to get the downstream impact, right, and benefits. You could have the team work on it together. You could, there are lots of other, you need to brainstorm about that. But don't make it a burden. Don't make it a requirement to the employee. You've done this great thing. I'm going to reward you with all this extra work. Okay? So have it be an open conversation. See what the employee feels about taking on some extra work. For a lot of employees, the professional development piece of it is huge upside, and they are probably willing to put in a little extra work in order to increase their visibility with their peers or with other managers and other departments. So they might say yes, but again, give them the opportunity to decline or find some other ways to get it done. Okay, so that's employee recognition. Guys, so easy to do this right. Okay, so employee recognition is acknowledgement and reward. For acknowledgement, there needs to be 3 things to do it well. 1, it should be contextualized. 2, it should be specific. 3, it should be very personal. Call out the individual. Okay, and then for reward, if you have a quid pro quo program, that's great. Look for opportunities to give the employee some ownership to extend their own professional development and realize some benefits downstream for other people. Ta-da! Super easy. Okay, next week we are going to be talking about SOPs and building systems. And I'm not going to tell you how to put together an SOP. You can Google that. Formats are out there. They're templates. You can actually open up Microsoft Word and download a template and just start going. But I worked on SOPs for years and years. And there are 3 elements that if people don't do these 3 things in their SOPs, they will not be effective. Nobody will follow your SOPs unless you have 3 things. So if you're interested in hearing about those, tune in next week. Until then, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week and weekend, and I will see you here, same place, same time, next Thursday. Okay, bye-bye.